I'm always a sucker for something revolutionary in PC case design, and the Thermaltake View 37 is no exception. You're looking at a full tower with 8 PCIe slots, plenty of space at the rear for cable managing, and a very unique side window. That's not the first time that they've done something like this with acrylic. That's what this is, by the way, not tempered glass. That would make this case much more expensive than it is, but it is implemented very well in this chassis. I'll tell you up front that this isn't my favorite case by any means, but I certainly like the direction Thermaltake's taking here. Let's start with the exterior and work our way in. Now this chassis screams Thermaltake with its many transparent panels, steel and plastic mixture of the frame, and RGB accents. Included with the RGB model of the View 37 though, which is the one you're looking at here, are 3 Ring Plus 140mm fans with 12 addressable LEDs, along with an analog controller and sync function to be used in conjunction with various ASUS, Gigabyte, and MSI motherboards. I explained this in more detail in my CES coverage right here, but in a nutshell, this box and its corresponding software allow for full RGB syncing with various vendor hardware. Also included with the case is this PCIe switchboard of sorts. It does not connect to the motherboard in any way. Instead, it connects to the box, which is going to be more than likely on the right side of the case. So instead of having to remove your right panel in order to change the color scheme or the fan RPMs, you can control all of that with this switchboard here. All in all, it's a very cool concept on paper, and I'm glad to see that they're able to work with MSI Gigabyte and ASUS here to get their hardware syncing up all in one software package, which is really nice. You don't have to have 4 or 5 different icons on your desktop that control different things. You can control all of it with one single software package, and that's what Thermaltake's seeking to do, make that much simpler. So I like where they're going with that. Now let's talk about some things that I don't like about the case. Now while Thermaltake have definitely focused on accentuating the color coordination in the View 37, they've had to certainly compromise in places that I would not have personally compromised. I want to state though at this point, if you're wondering, this panel here is not tempered glass. I think I paraphrased it a bit earlier. This is actually acrylic, and they've thickened the acrylic to make it look like tempered glass. I actually thought it was at first, I must confess. I didn't know anything about this case except for what I had seen briefly at CES, but they had a few tempered glass panels like this too on other cases, so I wasn't sure which one it was. It is acrylic. It will scratch just like any other acrylic, despite it being slightly thicker than most acrylic panels in some of the older cases and the cheaper models out there right now. So something to keep in mind. This is why the case is not, $250. It's around 160, 170 USD if you want the RGB model. If you don't want the RGB model, you're looking at around 100, 110 bucks, which I think is fair for a full tower. You're going to pay a bit more for that anyway, just because you're going to have that extra hardware support. The front panel is tinted significantly more so than the side panel, which is fine. All you can see through the front in most cases anyway is the fan array, and since these are RGB, the tint provides a special kind of subdued character to the otherwise bulky chassis. And while we're here, front I/O spans the top portion of this face, consisting of the usual 2 USB 3.0 ports, 2 2.0 ports, mic and headphone jacks, and dedicated power and reset switches. Okay, now I prolonged the inevitable, the negatives of this case. I am disappointed in the lack of a power supply basement, especially seeing as though this is a really big curved acrylic panel that spans the entire height of the case. I understand why Thermaltake went this route, making room for water cooling enthusiasts and larger radiator configs, but even a half or segmented basement in my book is better than no basement. It just looks too bare, and come on, this is 2018. Something else I have to mention in 2018 is airflow, and this case is not optimized for it. I don't even need to run tests to tell you that this thing is going to have a tough time pulling in air. You have just very fine grill slits on the left and right side, and those are really the only access points for airflow. The acrylic front panel, the slightly tinted panel up front that I was just talking about, spans the entire height of the case up front, so no air will pass through there, and anytime air has to make a 90-degree turn to be pulled in through fans, which are already pushed between the chassis and that front panel, you're not going to really have a good time in terms of airflow. We're talking maybe 2 centimeters worth of clearance between the front of the fan. They put 2 ring fans up front, but I went ahead and moved all 3 to the front just because it looks a bit more uniform. All 3 of these are going to have a difficult time pulling in air, period, because they are so close to this front acrylic panel. I really wonder what Thermaltake was thinking here. They probably already decided way in advance that this case wasn't going to be very well airflow optimized, and that's fine. I mean, if that's what you're going for, okay, people are probably going to compromise on that anyway for a case that looks like this. And hey, look, up top, you're also compromising on radiator and fan compatibility because you have no mounting points up top. This is just one solid piece of acrylic that spans the left side panel and the top panel. And yeah, you can't pull air through an acrylic panel, right? So they didn't put anything up top. It's purely aesthetic, and that's what I think this entire case was going for, was just like that wow factor. Other purely aesthetic things the V37 opts for include vertical graphics card mounting support, so you don't get a riser cable, which I think defeats the purpose of even having that option there, but you can buy one separately. They're pretty expensive, but I found that Thermaltake riser cables are among the best out there. They're very consistent. I had Jack send me 3 of them, and all 3 worked beautifully. I saw literally no degradation in graphics card performance. So if you want to pay that extra premium, that's fine. You can do what I've done here with the GTX 1070, mount it sideways, but it is awfully close to that left side panel, so you might be suffocating your graphics card just a bit more than you would otherwise if you had mounted it horizontally. But okay, enough with the negatives. I think that I've pretty much gotten most of them out of the way anyway. Most people are going to prioritize airflow, so that's going to be a pretty big negative. And then the fact that this is acrylic, so it scratches. This is acrylic, so it scratches. Nothing really premium about the case in that sense. That could also be taken as a negative, but hey, it keeps the cost down. I want to focus now on something that the V37 does very well, and that is cable manage, particularly behind the motherboard tray. This right section is immense, so big in fact that you can fit up to 4 3.5-inch hard drives here. I'm seriously talking about hard drives right behind the motherboard tray. The thickness is plenty for even the most extensive of cable routing, a format other manufacturers should follow. An extra few centimeters back here goes a long way. I'm looking at you specifically, Corsair. The building experience is just as crucial in my book as the end result, and the V37 capitalizes on its many rubber grounded cutouts as well, keeping things concealed and clean for viewing through the curved acrylic on the left. So my building experience was a great one thanks to that space offered by the right side. About 1.5 inches of clearance there is more than enough. I would say 1 inch is going to be optimal. If you have more than that, it's just gravy, and I really took advantage of it. If you have extra cable lengths, maybe cable extensions, you're not going to have a problem at all fitting those into the V37 one bit. Like most Thermaltake cases, this one has ample space for water cooling gear in particular. You can put a reservoir up front easily, no problem. You don't have, again, mounting support up top. You can put a radiator up front. You can also put a radiator along the right side panel. There's actually space for air to pass through that panel. So it's kind of funny to say this, but you might actually have better airflow moving through that right panel than you do up front, which is a little weird. So if you wanted like an intake system, you could do that, but it would look weird having a radiator there without fans being on, you know, the left side, right? So I don't know how you'd want to do that, but you have the option there to mount up to 3 fans, 3 140 mil fans along that right panel, also 3 140 up front along with their radiator counterparts, and then either a 120 or a 140 fan radiator config at the rear. That is pretty much it with the front panel and the rear panel. The top panel can't put anything, but you also have space down below if you want to put 1 or 2 intake fans below. That is certainly an option as well. So those are my thoughts on the V37. I expected a bit more just from like the hardware side. I think that the acrylic is just, it's one of those things like you understand why it's there, and I get it because of the price of like a curved tempered glass panel would bring this thing into $250 territory. I get that, but if you're trying to promote this case as like an aesthetically pleasing case, but you know in the back of your head that you have only acrylic for the front and the side, like if they had put, you know, tempered glass up front and then acrylic on the side, I would have understood that just a bit more. But you have acrylic up front, which is a cost-saving measure, and on top of that it's tinted, and then you also have that left panel, which is acrylic, which is already scratched to hell. It's really bad right here. I don't even know how I did that, but that's how acrylic is for you. I know that it's not a very premium case in that sense because it's not using glass, and that's just how it is in 2018, right? If a case has tempered glass, it's going to feel a bit more premium than its acrylic counterpart. So it's hard to dock the V37 for that, but I kind of have to because of the situation they put themselves in, particularly with this curved panel, which I don't think is necessary. It looks cool, but from a practical standpoint, it eliminates a lot of support, especially for custom cooling enthusiasts who want to put something up top like a radiator or even just a few fans. So is this case sexy? Oh yes, I give the sexy factor a 10 out of 10. Is it functional? Maybe a 7 out of 10 because it's missing that top, you know, the top support, right, for rads and fans, and it's got acrylic, which means it's going to scratch a lot. And then is it premium? This one's difficult to gauge because premium is more or less in the eye of the beholder. In my opinion, I don't think it's very premium. I really don't, because I know that it has acrylic front and side panels, and it just, I mean, there are just things about this case that weren't thought through all the way or that don't line up perfectly that bother me to an extent. If you're OCD, you'll agree with me. For instance, the curve of the acrylic doesn't line up flush with the curve of the chassis. There was actually a pretty big gap at the rear of mine, and I think that's what bothered Thermaltake too, since they decided to cover it up with a piece of plastic held on by 4 screws. A bit of a cheesy cover up here. I mean, you can see it right when you take it off. You have to take this off if you want to remove the entire acrylic panel, but it's just something that they really didn't see all the way through, and it shows the quality, right? The workmanship that went into this case wasn't top notch. So knowing these things, again, in the back of my head bothers me, and that's why I'm not going to say that it's a premium case. At 160 or 170 USD, that's asking a bit much. The non-RGB model is much more reasonable in my book, closer to $100. I think Thermaltake's charging a bit too much for the control software and the little control box that you're going to get with the ring fans to be able to sync everything up color-wise. I think that's too much of a premium. This price might shy people away, knowing that there are compromises in the chassis itself. With that, if you appreciate the review or the opinions presented, let me know by giving this one a thumbs up. I appreciate it. If you disagree with me in any sort of way, I want you to disagree with me openly and publicly in the comments below. I want to know what you think I got wrong about this case, or what you see in this case that I don't maybe see. After building it, I feel pretty confident with my opinions, but you might change on mine, and I might have to come back into the comment section later and fix something. You know, you never know. People bring things to your attention that you don't see right away, and I appreciate when you guys do that for me, because it allows me to kind of just, I don't know, take in multiple perspectives, not just my own. If you want to subscribe, I would appreciate that. Click that red button down below and stay tuned for more reviews like this one. This is Science Studio. Thanks for learning with us.